It was one of those nights when the rain wouldn't stop. The cafe had been empty for hours, and I was wiping down the counter just to keep myself awake. The city outside hummed quietly, neon reflections, passing cars, the kind of loneliness that feels almost comforting when you get used to it. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. That's when the door opened. He walked in like the night itself had followed him. Leather jacket, bruised knuckles, eyes that carried more weight than he could probably name. He didn't say much, just ordered a black coffee. No sugar, no milk. His voice was low, a little rough but polite. I remember thinking he didn't seem like the kind of man who usually said please. While the espresso machine hissed, I tried not to stare. He looked tired, not from work but from life. When I handed him the cup, he nodded once and sat by the window, facing the street. The rainlight painted him in silver. I told myself he was just another customer, but something about him felt like a story waiting to happen. He came back the next night. Same hour, same order. Different brews. I asked if he worked nearby, and he gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Something like that, he said. The conversation ended there, but his presence stayed long after he left. I started leaving the lights on later than usual. Maybe I told myself it was for business, but the truth was simpler. I was waiting. Ryan, my boyfriend, didn't notice. He was always busy. Emails, deadlines, meetings. When we talked, it was about bills, plans, or groceries. The warmth between us had thinned out so slowly I hadn't realized how cold it had become. I guess that's why Marco, though I didn't know his name yet, stood out so sharply. He didn't have to say much for me to feel seen. A week went by like that. Late nights, quiet talks, shared silences. One evening, I locked the door early, hoping for rest, and just as I flipped the sign to closed, he knocked. He looked hesitant, like maybe he shouldn't be there. I opened the door anyway. Didn't mean to bother you, he said. You're fine. I was just cleaning up. Coffee still on? I nodded. He smiled, small but real, and stepped inside. While I made his drink, he looked around the cafe. You run this place alone? Most nights, I said. He nodded. It's peaceful here. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. He asked what it was like owning a cafe. I told him about the early mornings, the regulars, the smell of roasted beans that never quite leaves your clothes. He listened like every word mattered. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. I used to work nights too, he said. Different kind of job. Better now? I asked. He hesitated, trying to make it that way. There was something in that pause, an honesty that didn't need details. I didn't press. Some stories you can hear without being told. He stayed until closing, helped me wipe tables even though I didn't ask. When our hands brushed, it was brief, accidental, but it made me forget what I was about to say. He looked up, smiled again, and said, You shouldn't stay here so late. Not safe, I laughed softly. You sound like you know that from experience. Maybe I do. Before he left, he glanced at the clock. Same time tomorrow? He asked, like it was casual. I just nodded. That night, lying beside Ryan, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain reminded me of the cafe, of the way Marco had said those words. Simple, almost ordinary. But they lingered. I thought about his hands, the scars on his knuckles, the tired look that somehow felt familiar. It wasn't attraction yet. It was recognition, two people quietly breaking in different ways. The next day, I found myself checking the time more often than usual. Every customer who walked in made me hope and then sigh. When the bell finally rang at midnight, there he was. Hood pulled low, same jacket, a faint bruise fading under his eye. Rough day? I asked. Better now, he said. We talked about nothing important. The music playing on the radio, the storm outside, how he didn't really like coffee but liked the smell of it. I laughed, and he said it was good to hear that sound. I hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone said that to me. When he stood to leave, he paused by the door. Thanks for keeping the lights on, he said. After he was gone, I sat at one of the tables, staring at his empty cup. I traced the circle of condensation it left behind. For some reason, it felt like the start of something dangerous, not because of what might happen, but because of what already was. I told myself it was just kindness, just friendship, just coffee. But deep down I knew better. I knew I'd be leaving the lights on again tomorrow night. He didn't come back the next night, or the night after that. The cafe felt colder, quieter, even though everything was the same. The lights, the smell of espresso, the hum of the refrigerator. I kept glancing at the door, pretending I wasn't waiting, but I was. By the fourth night, I told myself to stop thinking about him. Whatever he was running from, maybe he'd finally run far enough. But around closing time, the door opened. Marco walked in, and this time, his sleeve was soaked in blood. My chest went tight. "It's fine," he said quickly, seeing my face. "It's not as bad as it looks." I locked the door behind him before anyone could see. "Sit down." He hesitated, then did as I asked. I grabbed the first aid kit from under the counter, my hands shaking more than his. The cut on his arm wasn't deep, but it was fresh. I tried to stay calm as I cleaned it. "You should be in a hospital," I said. "Can't," he muttered. Too many questions. The way he said it told me everything I needed to know. Whatever trouble he'd left behind wasn't finished with him yet. When I pressed the bandage in place, he winced slightly. "Sorry," I whispered. He shook his head. "Don't be. Just not used to someone caring." That sentence hit harder than it should have. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. The silence between us wasn't awkward this time. It was full, heavy with something neither of us dared to name. When I was done, he rolled his sleeve back down. "You didn't have to help," he said. "I know," I replied, "but I wanted to." He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You shouldn't. Guys like me. We bring storms," I smiled back. "Maybe I don't mind a little rain." He laughed, quiet but real. I didn't realize until then how good it felt to make him laugh. After that night, something changed. He came by more often, not every night, but enough that I stopped pretending it was coincidence. Sometimes he'd talk, sometimes he wouldn't. We'd just sit there after closing, the coffee between us growing cold while the world outside slept. He told me he'd grown up on the rough side of the city, that he'd joined a crew when he was barely a teenager. "They were the only ones who looked out for me," he said. "Until they didn't. Are you still part of it?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, trying not to be. There was sadness in his voice, but also something else, hope. Like he wanted to believe in better days, but wasn't sure they existed. "Maybe you just need to find a new crowd," I said. "Yeah," he replied, looking at me. "Maybe I already did." That look stayed with me long after he left. At home, Ryan was sitting on the couch, laptop open, eyes glued to the screen. "You're late," he said, not looking up. "Busy night," I replied. He nodded absently. "You could hire help, you know." I didn't answer. I wanted to tell him I didn't need help in the cafe. I needed help remembering how to feel something between us. But I didn't. I just went to bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Marco's voice, his laugh, the way he'd said my name like it mattered. The next day, Marco came again. No bruises this time. He brought something, wildflowers, the kind that grow between cracks in the sidewalk. "They reminded me of you," he said with a half smile. I raised an eyebrow. "Because they look tired?" "Because they're still standing," he said. I laughed, but there was a lump in my throat. He placed the flowers in an empty coffee mug and set them on the counter. For a second I forgot everything else. Ryan, the guilt, the worry. It was just us, two people who probably shouldn't have found each other but somehow did. That night I asked him, "Do you ever think about leaving?" "Starting fresh?" He nodded slowly. "All the time. But when you've lived like I have, you start to think the world's already decided who you are." "Maybe it hasn't," I said. "Maybe it's waiting for you to decide." He smiled again, softer this time. "You talk like someone who believes in people." "Maybe I just believe in second chances," I said. He looked at me for a long time before whispering, "Then maybe you're the only one who does." We sat there until the lights flickered, signaling it was time to close. As he stood, I noticed he'd left half his coffee unfinished, like always. "Why never finish it?" I asked. He shrugged. "So I have a reason to come back." I smiled, trying to sound casual. "You don't need a reason." He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but then just nodded and walked out into the night. The doorbell chimed softly behind him, and for a long time I just stood there, staring at the flower mug under the cafe light. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something dangerous, something honest, something I hadn't felt in years. The night the sirens came, I knew something had gone wrong. It was late, close to closing time. I was stacking chairs when I heard shouting from the street. Then came the flash of red and blue lights reflecting through the cafe windows. My heart dropped before I even knew why. I stepped outside and there he was, Marco, being handcuffed beside a police car. His jacket was torn, his face pale but calm. For a moment he looked straight at me. He didn't say anything, but his eyes did. "Don't come closer," I froze. The officer pushed him into the back seat, and before I could blink, they were gone. The sound of the sirens faded, but the silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. That night, Ryan found me sitting at the counter, staring at nothing. "What happened?" he asked. "Someone I know got arrested," I said quietly. He frowned. "That guy from your cafe. Ethan, you shouldn't get involved. People like that. They only bring trouble." I wanted to say Marco wasn't like that.
That he was trying to change.
But I didn't. Maybe Ryan wouldn't have understood. Or maybe I was too tired to try. The next morning I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called the local station and found out he'd been taken in for questioning. No serious charges yet. But still, he was there. By noon, I was standing outside the county building. I told myself I just wanted to make sure he was okay. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. When I finally saw him, it was through a glass partition. He looked exhausted, eyes dull, shoulders slumped. But when he saw me, he smiled. "A real one. You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice faint through the phone. "I couldn't just do nothing," I replied. He looked down, shaking his head with a small laugh. "You always show up when people shouldn't. Then maybe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The space between us felt heavy, full of everything we hadn't said aloud. "I told you I was trying to change," he finally said. "I meant it, but sometimes the past doesn't let go easy." "You still can," I said softly. "This doesn't have to be the end," he smiled sadly. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I have to," I whispered. "Someone should." When I left the station, I felt something shift. Whatever I'd been holding on to, the hope, the guilt, the confusion, it all tangled into something clear. Marco had come into my life like a storm, but not all storms destroy. Some just wash things clean. That night, I went home and told Ryan the truth. Not everything, but enough. That I'd been unhappy, that I'd found something in someone else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just sat there for a while before saying, "Maybe we both stopped trying a long time ago." I nodded. "Maybe." It was strange how quiet endings can be. We decided to part ways a week later. No fights, no anger, just a long silence and a soft goodbye. After that, the days blurred together. I threw myself into work, fixing things around the cafe, repainting the walls, trying to make the place feel new again. The mug with the wildflowers stayed on the counter, even after the petals dried. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Then one morning I found a letter slipped under the cafe door. My name was written in rough, familiar handwriting. "Ethan, I'm out." I made a deal. Told them what they needed to hear to clean the slate. Guess I'm finally free of that life. It's strange. Freedom feels quieter than I thought. You were right about second chances. Maybe I didn't deserve one, but I'm taking it anyway. You showed me something I never had before. Peace. Real peace. Keep that cafe light on. I might stop by one day. Not as who I was, but as who I'm trying to be. Marco, I read the letter 3 times before I could breathe properly again. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it into the drawer beneath the counter, right beside the old mug. That night, as I locked up, I left one light on near the window, the same one he always sat under. Not because I expected him to come back, but because hope is quieter than people think. Sometimes it looks like a single light left burning for no reason at all. Weeks turned into months. The cafe grew busier. New faces filled the tables. Laughter replaced the silence, and life began to move forward again. But every time the bell over the door rang, I'd glance up for half a second, just in case. Maybe one day he'll walk in again. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'll be here, keeping the lights on. Because sometimes, love isn't about who stays. It's about who teaches you how to stay standing.